Okay, good afternoon to those of you who are here at the Teachers Resource Center in Anguilla, and those of you who are following us. As at last check, we had over 50 joining us online, and that number we know is going to grow. I would like to introduce you to the Anguilla Genealogical Society, which was formed some time ago, but has been dormant, and we are now going to be reviving the society, and we have a wonderful, huge, great project to engage us, to keep us engaged. It's called the Great Anguilla Family Tree Project, and the idea for this came from a gentleman who is to my left, Dr. Ronald Harrigan. Dr. Harrigan is not just the one who introduced this project, but he is probably one of the persons who was responsible for planting the seed for the society in the first place. But certainly, as regards this evening, he is the person who has done almost all of the legwork for this. And so I want to thank him and recognize him for this, Dr. Ronald Harrigan. Of course, with a good Anguillian name like Harrigan, you don't have to ask where he's from. You might ask who you for. But certainly, Dr. Harrigan of the Shoal Bay Harrigans spent much of his life in the Virgin Islands as a vice president of the University of the Virgin Islands, which is my alma mater. So we're very happy to have him here in Anguilla now in his work with the Anguilla Community College board. So I'd like to also recognize to my right Mr. George Leonard Kentish. I will show you that this is also a good long-standing Anguillian name. It's a rare name, but it's been around quite a long time in Anguilla. And of course, I am Timothy Hodge, and Hodge is one of the original Anguillian names. So I'd like to welcome you here, and we're going to get started, and we're going to talk about this Anguilla Family Tree Project. So the issue of one's genealogy is always something which is interesting to some and not interesting to others. So it's kind of a strange subject. Some people don't want to hear who you're for, but some people want to know the very first question is who you're for, especially in Anguilla. And that gets you very far in Anguilla, who you're for. We can tell lots of stories about that. So we can imagine that if we go back far enough, we will find that it is true that all of we is one family, to use a good colloquial Anguillan term. There's a lady here this afternoon who met her, introduced or welcomed her first cousin four times removed. And that goes on and on across Anguilla, and if we really extend it out, we will find some connection somewhere if we dig hard and deep enough. So this project is going to do just that. It's going to seek to do just that. Now, I have a first cousin whose grandson wanted to find out, to do a presentation in school, as he was required to do, of his ancestors. And so she approached me about doing this. And so I will say her name. Her name is Lena Lloyd, the widow of Clayton Lloyd. So her grandson is looking for a research on where he came from. Now, just to show you how interesting this is, when I did the research, in his ancestors comes up people like Jeremiah Gomes, Clayton Lloyd. I mean, all these are names who we know and who are his direct relatives. All of the doctors, Lloyd, Alan Gomes, and of course the Gomeses, Ronald Webster, Atlin Harrigan, Peter Adams, who would be his great-grandfather, Walter Hodge, and I can go on and on. So that goes to show you that this little boy is connected to lots of people who you can Google and find out who they are. Now, it's not going to be so easy for everybody. That's the reason why we want to do this great Anguilla family tree. I was able to do some research, and I, again, at the urging of Dr. Harrigan, for a presentation I made in Puerto Rico at the Caribbean Genealogical Society meeting several years ago. And the subject then was about Vieques and the Virgin Islands, the Spanish Virgin Islands as they are now called. And of course, in our history, if you know our history, there were 3 attempts to settle these islands, the island of Vieques from Anguilla. 3 attempts to settle the island of Vieques from Anguilla. Now, if you think about it, you go past the British Virgin Islands, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and you go right under the nose of the Spanish in Puerto Rico, in San Juan, 140 miles from Anguilla. That's where the Anguillians went to settle this island right under the nose of the Spanish. It goes to show a lot about how brave and how crazy maybe the Anguillians of those days were. The last attempt to settle it was in 1717, and they did it against the wishes, the express wishes of the colonial authorities. They directly told the Anguillians not to try it again because they had done it twice before. Now, if we fast forward 250 years from 1717, what do we get to? 1967. In 1967, well, the Anguillians kind of did the same thing all over again, snubbed their noses at the colonial authorities, right? And well, what is really amazing is that the names that are in that 1717 group that went to Vieques are the same names that are showing up in 1967. So we are able to trace our connections, our family connections, historical connections, and there is lots of really amazing stuff that comes up. Now, I'll use myself as an example. I come from Island Harbor, and up there are just a few surnames. So I went as far as I could to make sure that I wasn't going to marry into the same surname. I went to South Hill. I married a wonderful young lady who didn't even have an Anguillian name. Her name is Hall, H-A-L-L, which, by the way, we can trace directly to Barbados and West Hall and the Halls in Barbados. So we can trace that connection there, and I have traced that connection. So, and her name is Hall, and her father is Carty, so, well, she's not going to be my cousin for sure. Well, not so long ago, I sat at a wedding of the son of a gentleman who is sitting here today, and I sat down next to this lady, and I don't want to use the term, but I'll just say it so that people can understand. A white lady sat down next to me and her husband, and somehow we got to talking, and she told me, I'm a Derek, and I have family connections in Anguilla and whatever else. It so turns out that she's related to me. Well, she's related to both my wife and I. And I can go on and on because this happens all across Anguilla. So really and truly, we are really one big family. And if we were to be able to have success, a good success, in the creation of this great Anguilla family tree, we would, I think, establish, do something which is really wonderful. Some people have done it. I have done it to a certain extent. The others here who have done it, who are trying as far as possible to create a family tree. But when we look at something like this, ancestral mathematics, I found this on the net the other day. So I have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, 16 second great-great-grandparents, etc., etc. So when we get to about 9 or 10 generations, we are into the thousands and the 2000s, because that's just how our geometrical progression goes. So that Governor Arthur John Hodge, who is the first person in my family tree that I have traced directly to, goes back about 9 generations, I would think, wow, I've found myself here, but I've only found one of those 1,024 8th great grandparents. So it just goes to show you how much there is to be researched, and with the help of DNA and so forth, now you can find relatives who you never knew about, names that you don't recognize. But in Anguilla, for sure, where there are the names that we recognize, so that we do have names such as Hodge and Harrigan and Lake and Kentish and Fleming and Brooks and so forth, we should be able to do this. We should be able to do this. But herein is a problem. We do not have any birth records for Anguilla, official birth records for Anguilla, before 1883. That is when they started to be kept in the governmental system in Anguilla, state records, 1883. Now that's not so far back, because my grandfather, my father's father, was born in 1884. So had he been born 2 years earlier, he wouldn't be in those records. It just goes to show you how difficult a project this is without source documents. Now there are church records before that, but the church records before that, if you can imagine, were written on paper. I don't really know the science of the paper, but I understand that there used to be the paper that they used in the early, like 1300, 1400, 1500, etc. Those records are able to be preserved much better than those that came later on in the 1700s because of the ink or whatever it was that they were using. So that the records that exist, the church records that existed in the 1800s, and not many before that, in Anguilla, a lot of them have disintegrated into mush. And so, fortunately, there were persons who were able to photograph some of those records and to construct databases from them. Now, from those databases, you can find your way back if you're fortunate. I was able to do it for myself because the persons in my family tree, starting from Governor Arthur John Hodge, you can Google Arthur John Hodge and you will find him, right? He's a historical figure. So we know this guy existed. We know his children existed. And then we know who his children married and etc. And we come right down to me. Because they were persons who owned properties, etc., they left land. I would leave this to my 8 children, and so the 8 children are named, and then they would leave land to their 4 children or 6 children, and they are named. And so I was able to establish my record on one of those lines. But Think about it. It's only one of perhaps a thousand. So that I can trace my lineage right back to Governor Arthur John Hodge. Now, there are some Hodges now, for example, and that is really using the Webster line. The Hodge line, I can only go back to my great-grandfather. As my grandfather's father, I do not have who his parents were going back. But what happens is that even though you don't have the records, you have the stories, the knowledge that resides in people's heads. And that is where this is going to be so important. Because if we don't have the record, we want to be able to get people to go to their memories, to the memories of their parents and their grandparents, and even the great-grandparents, and go back as far as you can, and write it down, and then we're going to be able to combine them together and come up with the great Anguilla family tree, and show how it is that the Hodges connect to the Websters connect to the Cartys connect to the Brooks, and the Brooks to the Harrigans, etc., because this absolutely did happen and does happen. So at this time, I want to introduce to you Dr. Harrigan, and he's going to tell you, take it from here.
Thank you, Tim, for that introduction. It is a pleasure. Genealogy is in my blood. I just love it. And when you enjoy family research, you really feel good about the whole thing. And I've been doing genealogical research for many, many years, since about from the time I was a little boy, because I had an aunt who used to tell me about her mother and her grandmother and so on. So that all stayed with me. And then, and later on, when I really got into it, I used to sit down with my family, my aunts and uncles here in Anguilla, and they will share with me the family history. And what was nice about that get together was that, you have my oldest uncle and my second oldest aunt sitting together, and they kind of knocking each other and telling me, and they were able to share with me that family history and feeding off of each other. And Tim just alluded to that when he talked about memory, family memory. I believe that, and I'm here tonight to talk about genealogical research outside of Anguilla. He gave, when Mr. Banks come, he'll give you some more information about the resources here in Anguilla. But I'm here to talk about the sources outside. But I had to begin with that because we begin with talking to our parents, our grandparents. Believe it or not, those are the best sources you could have. I have found that talking to those people give you that foundation so that when you go to the books, when you go to the written source, you can do a comparative situation. And that helped me a lot. Because not all the time they're accurate, but they give you enough information for you to go further in your research, in your family research. So by talking to my aunts and uncles and family, by they sharing information with me, and then I'm go to the church records and the civil records and so on, I was able to put together as much as I can. I have not printed my tree yet for anyone, but because every day I find something new, and I'm just afraid to go out there and print and then, oh man, I forgot to put this in. But I'm going to get there one day. But in terms of research, you're going to have to help me with this. How do I get out to this area? Down? Okay, here we go. Thank you. what I've done was I've put together a list of resources and sources that people that we use, that people we can use, you can use outside of Anguilla, and there are a lot of them. There are a matter of fact, there are quite a bit about the Caribbean. So that I'm going to go through this list, and I'm not going to read all the stuff here, but I just want to let you know the Family History Library has microfilm. The Family History Library, one of the most important libraries of genealogical research, is in possession of the Mormon Church in Salt Lake City. I've been to their vault inside the mountain in Utah, and where I was helped by them in doing research on my Harrigan family in Anguilla and my family in the Virgin Islands as well. And you're going to find that a lot of the information that you're going to see here tonight came out of that setting. You know, they were one of the first to go around the world microfilming the church records of churches throughout the world. And when they did that, they kept a copy for themselves, and they gave the church a copy. So the church was able to film those records that Tim talked about were really flimsy. You know, if you touch them too hard, they kind of fall apart. So they were able to do a good job in terms of securing that information for the churches as well as for research and so on. So here you have this one, this linkage here, www.familytreemagazine.com. The Family History Library has microfilm a wealth of Caribbean records and records from the Bahamas, the Emerson, Nevis, Anguilla, St. Kitts, and vital records from 1859. You notice Anguilla, I believe we got started here in about 1650 something. Tell me if I'm wrong. When the settlement and beyond 1650 something. Okay? And I should mention, because I want to go to that right before I forget, that in 1718, correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, we found a list of inhabitants in Anguilla. And on that list was a Kentish. Believe it or not, a Harrigan, a Hodge, a Lake. 1718. And this list was compiled by a military group or something. And we could, I have a copy of the list. Tim has an updated copy of the list, which, we saw when we compared the two lists, we found that that some of the names had changed. Lake was spelled differently on one list, and then in the list that we got from Tim, it showed L-A-K-E, and before that it was L-E-K-E. Right. You understand what I'm saying? So those are the kind of things we find, and when you get into genealogical research, you'll find that the issue of names is very important, but you have to do a lot of detective work in trying to find what you're looking for, because some of these names, don't let them fool you. They're the same person when you get into date of birth and place and so on. Okay, so I just showed you the Family Tree Magazine is one source that you have available to do genealogical research, because don't forget now, Anguillians from the very beginning were always going abroad to work and support the family back home. So that we have family all over the Caribbean, all over the world, I should say, and so that having this kind of source available to you, you can go there and find maybe where your family, those Anguillians that settled in St. Kitts, Nevis, wherever they went to, you may be able to find information about your family in those places. Oh, let me go back there. Okay, another source is the Family History Guide. The Family History Guide is a free website that represents the best-in-class learning environment for family history. Its scope is broad, but it focuses on narrow enough to help you achieve your goals. So, and the mission is, our mission is to greatly increase the number of people actively involved in family history worldwide. So this is another source that is available to us here, those of us who are doing family history research. The other one, I don't know. This one here is, and I'm not sure why that didn't come out like it should have. But it's, let me see if I go down a little bit more. This one here is the Caribbean Surname Index. I could say that because I'm sure that if you Google that information, you're going to get you'll get the headings. You're going to get the headings and so on. But if you and if you Google, for example, Roots Web runs a Caribbean email discussion list. All these sources are available to you online. Those of you who are computer savvy, okay? So, and these are specific to the Caribbean. So I'm giving you this information so you can, once you get online, you can put in any of the information there, and you'll be able to see further information about research in the Caribbean of Anguilla people and so on. The Caribbean Family History. www.caribbeanfamilyhistory.org. We have created various databases to assist Caribbean family history. See, the information is already out there for us to use. It's just a matter of us using it. So you go into that website, and they will tell you what you can do, how they can help you, how far you can go by researching using their website. Okay. The other one is Caribbean Roots. Caribbean Ancestry and Heritage. And I got all of this from the internet. It came right off the internet. So I'm sharing this with you. You go on the internet, you're going to find it. Caribbean Genealogy is new. They're saying it's new, but we know it's not new, but it's there. There are a few books or websites which describe sources or techniques. So there are a few. So, but if you go through all that we're going to present tonight, there are a lot more, you'll be able to expand your search quite a bit. So Caribbean Roots is a very important source as well. Early Caribbean Digital Archives for collaborative research and study of pre-C20 Caribbean literature and so on. So this particular website, like I say, seeks to engage both scholars and students in shared critical study of the textual, material, and cultural histories of Caribbean by providing them with innovative digital techniques. So this is a source where you can really get into, if you're really doing serious scholarly work in the area of genealogy and so on. I put Cuba in here, and that's because we know that Anguillians migrated not only to the Dominican Republic, but also went to Cuba as well. I had family who went to Cuba, and I know, as a matter of fact, we still have people in Cuba from Anguilla, you know. And so that these people, this particular source is there, and there are ways in which you can access that information. I know in Miami has a Cuban genealogy group, and those of us here who know of our family members who migrated to Dominican Republic and Cuba, you probably know, if you have an address or something, you may be able to trace your roots. I know for a fact because I've been to Cuba many times. I've been to Cuba from 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19. And I've met with people in Cuba, people from the Virgin Islands as well as the other Caribbean islands. And I sat with them. Some of them brought me all their passport and all the documents of their parents when they get married in St. Kitts and all that kind of stuff. Because they're asking me if I could help trace their family. You understand what I'm saying? And I'm still doing that actively right now. There's a group who asked me if I can find a family in St. Kitts because they like to set up a linkage, and they brought me all the documents from the parents, their grandparents and so on, when they were married and so on. And that was in Cuba. You know, a lot of people still have that information, you know, to bring them from home. It's all brown, you know, after coloration and so on, but they're saving them, they're preserving them because they believe that one day they might be able to use them to travel outside of Cuba. So Cuba is a source where we can go as Anguillians to trace our family roots as well. This is one of the most important genealogical resource you'll find anywhere. This is the one that's associated with the Mormon Church. And believe it or not, wherever you go, whatever you do, you're going to find that Ancestry.com is going to take you back to Ancestry.com, most of them. So I would encourage you. Now, there's a fee, of course, for some of these. I'm a member of Ancestry.com. It costs me a couple $100, I believe. But, if you're really interested in doing serious genealogical research, you're going to have to pay some money for some of this stuff. But Ancestry.com is one of the best known, well-respected sources for genealogy in the world. Family Search as well, FamilySearch.org. They also involve some of these. You can get a lot of information without paying a fee. Others, you have to pay a fee. So this is another source that you can research. You can conduct research here on. Ellis Island. I mentioned earlier, many Anguillians traveled all over the world to New York and so on. And you believe it or not, Ellis Island, you find when Anguillians travel from the Caribbean to United States, they all had to go through Ellis Island at one point in time. And some of them, Ellis Island to New Jersey, Port Amboy, New Jersey, as you well know, large Anguillian community there. So you find many people listed in the Ellis Island database that might be of interest to you. Okay? Caribbean Genealogy Library in St. Thomas. I used to volunteer in this library while I was in St. Thomas, and it's a good source to use. Believe me. There are a lot of Anguillians in the Virgin Islands, and there were people Anguillians coming to the Virgin Islands way back. And the genealogy library in the Virgin Islands has an excellent collection of information dealing with travel, census information, and so on that may be able to help you. I shared with my colleagues the other day a list I have of Anguillians traveling to the Dominican Republic, and they stopped on the boat in St. Thomas. And this is back in 1920 or something. And there was a 1919, because I think it was just after the transfer, and there was a Dominican consulate in St. Thomas from the Dominican Republic. So it was easier for those coming from St. Martin, from Anguilla, from Tortola to stop in St. Thomas, clear their papers, and then move on to San Pedro to work in the cane fields. So that, and you see all the names, Richardson, Hodge, Fleming, Harrigan, everybody name, is on that list, And I told them, you may find one of your family members on that list. Because don't forget, many of these people traveled to the Dominican Republic and then on to Cuba, but some of them didn't come back. Some of them started families over there. You understand? So it's important for us to, that's one source that's available to us to determine where our family members went to and where they may still have family for you to find out about. The Danish West Indies, Denmark, the Danish government, and I believe the English government is probably ready to do the same thing, but the Danish government has compiled a database of Virgin Islands records. Then it says, a database contains Danish records relating to slavery in what became the U.S. Virgin Islands, and it goes back all the way back to slave time, all the way up to 1917. Okay? And and they have entered this information online. So if I want to see, and I'm doing some research on my mother's family in the Virgin Islands, if I can go into this database and find out where my people were on my mother's side, my mother's side in St. Thomas. So this is an excellent source. And here, believe it or not, because when in my research on St. John, I found Harrigan people from Anguilla, going all the way back to before 1850 and so on. You see? So there's this migration that's captured in these records, and you'll find, and we can find, all of us can find, when you go into go to these sources, you'll be able to come away with information about Virgin Islander Anguillians who traveled and migrated to the Virgin Islands. Those of you who have been to the Virgin Islands have heard the name Coakley in St. Croix, right? Castle Coakley. Coakley's the Anguillian name. Right here in Anguilla. Okay? Flemings and all those people. Right here in Anguilla. Okay? And Tim mentioned earlier about the migration of Anguillians to Vieques. On 2 occasions. I think he mentioned that. Huh? 3 occasions. I was a little slow on that one. But I'm saying that Anguillians were going to those places a long time ago. And what happened? St. Croix at the time needed planters who were ready to come into the island. They give the planters special concessions for them to come in and set up estates, sugar cane estate, plantations. Coakley was one of those people. Okay, came out of Anguilla, came down there, and so we have that kind of, and that information is all available in these records that I'm talking about. Okay, and I also have here the Netherlands Antilles. We have St. Martin right across the water here. French St. Martin is just an extension of Anguilla. We know that. All of us know that. So this is the Dutch area. We just have to find a way to get some of that French information and our French genealogy over there in French St. Martin. But you can get information about our family members who migrated to St. Martin, went on to Aruba, Curacao, and so on from these records. Okay? So I think that then I also mentioned here the British Virgin Islands online genealogy, another source that might be helpful to you. But if you notice the piece at the bottom, it says Ancestry.com, and those areas can be searched free of charge at your local family center. So what the BVI is saying, listen, you can do research, yes or no, but you'll find a lot of information on the Ancestry.com website and those other areas. Okay? So that's what I want to share with you. And I believe I want to go back to my first point, that talking to your family members, talking to the older generation, senior citizens, that is to me your best and primary source of starting your genealogy tree. This whole Great Anguilla Family Tree Project really is designed for, once all of us begin to do what we're going to do, we begin to see the linkage that we have and find out that those people from Island Harbor have family all the way down in West End, because at one time this island was so small that people traveling all over, So we're going to find that out. I really feel we're going to find out a lot about that. So and we need to get over the myth that people don't want to talk about the family history, because we need to do that. One of the things one of the reasons why genealogy research is important has to do with health. When you go to the doctor, he says, well, you have anyone in your family who has so-and-so? who has diabetes, who has, and sometimes you can't answer the question because you don't know the answer. But if through genealogical research, you can find out whether or not the members in your family who have had health issues, and your doctors and the medical people can be better informed about how to treat you based on that information. So it's not just finding out who your brother and sister, no. Sometimes you want to get this information to help you with your health history. And I think I like to push that angle because not everybody wants to be sharing information about the family, but if you're going to do that, it's going to help you in many ways, especially in the health area. So I want to thank you for your time. We'll be here to take questions at the end, but right now, I believe Mr. Kentish or Mr. Banks, okay, you want to go? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to share my experience in terms of getting involved in genealogy. I love my family, just like most persons here. This evening I saw a young lady, good friends, and I said that I didn't know you were interested in genealogy. She said, sure. I love my family. And I think that's one of the first things which drive people to get involved in genealogy. If you really love your family and you want to find out about your family roots, that's your passion. But as Dr. Harrigan and Tim said earlier, one of the important things, talk to your elders, your grandparents, your grandmother, your mother. And those young folks now, you may not think about getting involved in genealogy, but at some point in time, it dawns on you, one day, I would like to know more about my family background. And suddenly, the folks with the information are no longer around. And I got involved at a pretty late stage when my mother memory was fading her a bit. I started with doing research on my grandfather's side, the Lake side of the family. The only thing that I knew of, I heard of, was my great-grandfather's name, John Joseph Peter Lake. I've never heard them mention anything about brother or sister or anything of the sort. It was just this name there. So I know absolutely nothing about him. And of my research so far, I know nothing at all so far. And I've been collaborating with Margaret here as part of the Lakes as well. She's doing some research to see what information we can get. But that part of the family, I know absolutely nothing about. Going on from there, you look at documenting. If you're talking to the senior persons, write down the information, or better still, if you want to record it. But when you, at some point in time, if you decide to get involved in genealogy, some of the basic and real information is recorded. That is important. The other thing which I found necessary, doing your DNA, having your DNA done. I had my mother's DNA done just before the year 2017, the year before she died. I had mine done in 2016. And it is incredible the amount of DNA matches which cropped up on, my website is on myheritage.com. And it's incredible the amount of matches that I've had shown up once her DNA was loaded, and my DNA as well, to the point where I have had matches coming up with family in Holland. And these are now people in their 20s. I didn't know anything about them, but these are the kind of matches, and this is how powerful DNA, having your DNA done can help you with identifying your family roots. And my family roots in St. Martin, as Doc mentioned earlier. St. Martin, Anguillians traveled between St. Martin quite regularly in those days. As a matter of fact, my grandfather and his brother, they used to row the boat from the forest to Grand Cars. And it appears as though, from what I gather, Grand Cars must have been like the Paris of those days, where the nightlife was for them. And incidentally, they both married two sisters. Mary, John Icilius, he got married to Mary Suzanne Hunt. And my grandfather, he was married to Anne Pauline Hunt. And they were both out of Grand Cars. And so we have quite a number of family on the French and on the Dutch side. And the family extends all the way into Aruba, Curacao, the Netherlands, America. And one other important, interesting thing we came up against was there was a niece of my grandfather who left here around 1919. Nobody knew which part of the world she was. And in about, I think it was about 2002, a gentleman from Antigua went to Cuba for medical attention. He was in this hospital. The nurse who attended to him first, couldn't speak any English. So she sought another lady who spoke some English. They got talking, speaking, and she said, well, my family is from the islands. And he said, well, who are they? And he said, well, they are Lakes. And he said, well, incidentally, I know a Dr. Lake, and he's from Anguilla. So she went home, told her mother about it, and they wrote a letter, enclosed some photographs, gave it to the gentleman, and voila. That's the family that we've been looking for almost 80 years in Cuba. Since then, well, two of them are here at the moment, the mother and the son. She's 91. But that's the way it is. And that family in Cuba is huge. That family, the niece, they had about 9 children, and one son had about 14 children. So that family down there is huge. So it is interesting, and I am perhaps one of the only family members who know quite a number of them, as I visited Cuba on 2 occasions, and I have really met a lot of them, some of them living in the United States. So it's interesting, and on my site I have about over 2,000 photographs on my heritage.com. I have picked up a lot of photographs from social media, Facebook, and that helps to make my site a little bit more interesting when you can see photographs of relatives. So that really, again, just recently, I had a message from a young lady in England inquiring about a family member. So I said, okay. And her mother is Dominican. But really, in truth and in fact, her grandfather is a Hajj. Now, when I started my research on the lake side, I'm just thinking lake. But as you progress, you will find out that it branches off. It could be the Hajjis in my family. And like Tim, Tim and I have been talking for quite a long time. And there's a lady in the States, Kathy Huggins. We've been talking. And it's only recently, after Tim shared his tree with me, and I looked at the same governor, Arthur John Hodge. Looked through there. One of his sons, Thomas Hodge, who was also a lieutenant governor here in Anguilla, he had a son, Thomas Hodge Sr., who married a Marie Maillard from St. Martin, and they had a son, Samuel Maillard Hodge. That's born in St. Martin. And he, Samuel Maillard Hodge, then married an Eleanor Gomes of Anguilla. From that union, they had about 6 children. The daughter, Jane Anna Gomes, but it seems as though she was born before Samuel and Eleanor were married. My great-grandfather, John Joseph Peter Lake, was then married to Jane Anna Gomes, coming from Samuel Maillard Hodge, going back to, as I traced just now, back to Governor Arthur John Hodge. So I found it rather interesting that I didn't realize that there was a Hodge line as well in the family. And to that extent that Tim and I are relatives come from that same line. So it is very interesting when you get going. But you have then, there's another lady who has been quite helpful for us, to us. That's Heather Nielsen, Tim, in England. Incidentally, she too comes from the Governor Hodge line as well. She has quite an extensive archive of information of Anguilla, St. Martin, St. Martin, I think St. Kitts and Antigua as well. So we do refer to her, send her emails with the name, date of birth, and that's important. And whatever information you can send to her, and she can send back to you quite a bit of information. As a matter of fact, it's from her that I got quite a lot of information on Samuel Maillard Hodge. So there again, resources that we can all tap into, and the doc identified quite a number of them online just now to help us in our research. So genealogy, it's very interesting, and I have been very happy talking with meeting a number of family members in the process and helping them to identify family members. And that's my thank you.
Okay, so we're going to have Mr. Banks going to come, and if you're not quite ready yet, he's ready.
Let's switch the slide around. You want to go PowerPoint? Yeah, you want to project it? Yeah, I'm doing this. This is you, right? Yeah, that's fine. Whoa, you want to copy this? Yeah, sure, go ahead.
You know, there's a website I didn't put up on the screen called Carrie Banner. And it's in Caribana that I found the 1718 listing of Anguillians that has Kentish and Lake and Hodge and Harrigan and everybody's name. And I think that I'll have to...
I can put it up there.
You put it up? Okay, good, thanks. Very important that you have that information as well, because it covers the entire British Caribbean, which is very interesting. Deals with marriage, birth, wills, all kinds of stuff.
Thanks. No, excuse myself. I'm sorry I had to come after this guy and that guy. But I hope that I'll be able to keep your interest for the rest of the evening. Why is that happening? Before I do from here, because I'm going to link to some, check it there. I'm going to link to some slides, some files. In the meantime, I'll ask him to entertain you with some jokes. Or a local comedian, yeah. Now, what I'm going to look at really is mainly some right, that's better. I'm not sure what it was. In Anguilla, there's some information. Let me go to slideshow. We do have some information which is useful in your research, and I'm going to look briefly to that information we have locally. There's a government register of births and marriages, and the records of deeds and wills. There's Anglican Church records of baptism, marriage, and burials. The Methodist Church register of baptism, marriage, and burials. And of course, which Dr. Harrigan was talking about, the oral history, which is very, very important. The government register of deaths and marriages, the register of births that are held at the court registry, and they go back to 1883. The official records are in several handwritten ledgers, which are in the court office, but these have been transcribed and put in the searchable electronic format. A lot of that work was assisted by the same Heather Nielsen who Leonard spoke about. In fact, you will see her coming up over and over again because she is our resource. Once you have the name and the appropriate date, you can begin the search and start to put the pieces together. Copies of individual records are available for a fee from the office. You can get, if you go there and you get a name or information, you can get either a marriage certificate, a birth certificate, or a death certificate for a fee. And they generally give you those information for a fee. There's the site, the email, the number at the office there is 497-2377, and the email is judicial@gov.ai. And you can go there and get the information. Now, also there at the office are the Mormon microfilms done in the 1990s. They're available, but there's no compatible reader at the office. But the Mormons came in 1990, and they went to the Anglican Church, the Methodist Church, the Court Registry, and did quite a lot of work, transcribed all that, and sent copies back. But they send them in American format, we don't have the ability to read, but I'm sure sometime we'll get around to that. But it's all there. And based on that, the whole Ancestry.com, created by the Mormons, was based on them going from country to country, microfilming all this information and putting up on Ancestry.com. So this site, which they've now sort of, not least, they've created, spin off a company, Ancestry.com, where it's all there. Right? The other government records, they are at the registrar. They are also records of wills going back to the 1871 to 1917. Copies of wills made by various persons, and Heather Nielsen also was very instrumental in in doing this. Herself and Barbara Burroughs and Heather Nielsen. This is stuff which they did, and this is over 77 pages, but the other many more. This is just a small sample of what they have done. Oh, sorry. It's not showing there. Why is that? I'm seeing it here, but it's not showing there. I'm looking at a record. I'll come back again. Okay, boss. I'll close it. I'll go back. And it's here. No, that's not it. Slide. Okay. No, it's not. Anyway, forget about it. You'll see it. It is just what I showed you. What I had to show was a copy of some slides which Heather had transcribed. Now, she took pictures, went back to UK, and sort of ciphered them. Now it's very tedious work. Heather is now in close to 90, isn't it? And Heather, but she is still very alert, right? And yeah, extremely alert. Where am I now? I think I went, okay. Okay. I left, okay. Oh, see, this way was? Showing now. No, I'm trying to, right, okay. So other records of deeds going back to, the deeds also, going back to 1700s to 1920. So if you transcribed by Don Mitchell, Heather Nielsen, and Martha Burroughs. Now, we do have copies of these transcripts. But what you can do, you'll find that when you use these deeds and wills, they are a starting point to establish relationships. You can see on an old deed, old will, names of I'm giving this to my son. And you get an idea who this, and you can then go because you get dates and the date, go into the registry, get names as a starting point to see where you want to be at. So the deeds and wills are very important ways of making connections which you might not otherwise be able to find unless you really tediously go to the court register. The Anglican Church. Now, the Anglican Church maybe has the most information. Their records go back to 1827, when the church was re-established in Anguilla after the Spanish invasion in 1794. And they have many federal handwritten ledgers, many of, however, in an advanced state of decay. But these records have been transcribed by Heather Nielsen and Martha Burrows in a searchable electronic format. So you can go they're either in PDF or searchable Excel, and you can put in a name and sort of find any person you're looking for. And all the information is there. I'm not seeing it the way I wanted to see it, so obviously it's not showing up, so I'm going to go back. For some reason, not showing on the screen, which it should. So these records are available at the Anglican Church. If you're interested in searching these records, we would recommend that you first contact the church office, 264-497-235, or email stmarysParish@gmail.com. Now, as I said, we do have those records, but I think the church, it's better you contact the church, because we wouldn't want to give it the church's information. We have a copy because we got it from Heather. But I think the church has the rights to that information, so you should contact the church as a first step. As I said, there are baptisms, marriages, births. In those old documents, you're able to find your people from 1827, your great-grandmothers. You can come all the way through and find family history all the way through from 1827. So that's it's a very good local source which you can do your research from. Now, the Methodist Church was destroyed the mission was destroyed by fire in 1910. So the records there only go back to 1910. So it's not as valuable as the resource at Anglican Church. These are also handwritten ledgers and have not been transcribed as yet, since they are much more recent. But you can go there as well and search the records and find the information at those at that number. You can call 497-2612 or email methodism@anguilla.com. So that those are the three main sources locally. And we're talking oral history. Of course, that is a very important source. Oral history is a collection of study of historical information. And you'll find that, as Tim was saying, Eleanor was saying, that in going through this information, he realized that he was related to Tim. Now, you can hear many local sources sent down by generation, and you may hear your grandmother, great-grandmother, talking about a story, a family story. And then you hear Tim's grandmother talking about the same story. And you realize, well, hey, Tim is, there's some connection here. Maybe that's one person was a joint ancestor of ours. So the local history is a very important way of making connections. And it's also an important way of recording what's going on, because some of this information is not written in books, right? But it's our role to write it in books, I assume. But the oral history is a very important way. You need to listen to your grandparents, great-grandparents. I've never known any of mine. Your aunts, great-aunts, and get that history written down. I remember the story about the family in Cuba. My uncle told me about himself and his cousin, two cousins going to Dominican Republic. And from there, they went to They ran 2 nights running from one estate to the other. And from there they went to Cuba. And in Cuba, they left one of their cousins, whose family, and that cousin has recently reconnected with the Anguilla family. And that is Jose. So we heard that story from him, but we never knew for sure about this family who were left, this cousin who was left in Cuba. So the family, the old people have these stories which you need to hear. And it's very important that you listen to them and that you, if possible, record them. So that I don't have anything else to say, just that let's give it the sources available, the church records and the government records, and of course, as I said, the oral history. Tim.
Thank you very much, Ken. Now we're going to open it up to a discussion in a moment, but I just wanted to say a few things based on what the other speakers have said. Of course, my work on genealogy, a lot of it is based on the research done by Heather as well. Heather Nielsen, we don't hear much about her cousin Martha Burroughs, but these were the 2 ladies who came to Anguilla in the 1990s and photographed the Anglican church records. Now, my genealogical research started really, I think probably about 1983 or 84. I was in the U.S. and I happened to sit down with my aunt who lived there, and her sister was visiting, and my father, who was their brother, who was visiting. So I had the 3 of them together, 3 of the 5 siblings, and I asked them about family. And unfortunately, I did not go back beyond their parents and their siblings. I thought that was way back. Now, I had the excellent opportunity because they would have known and they would have jogged each other's memories to know and to go much further back than I did. I wrote down what they said. I have it still on a piece of paper, but unfortunately, it could have been so much more. Now, I went on a website. For some reason, I got reinterested, I guess, about 2010, 2011, somewhere around then. And I went on this website and I said, I am Tim Hodge. I am Hodge, Webster, and Smith. That's all I knew. Hodge, Webster, and Smith. Could somebody help me? And Heather responded, and she said, well, I have records up until 1920. And my father was born in 1920, so fortunately. So she says, if you tell me who you're for, kind of thing, I will see if I can find you, or you could see if you could find yourself. And she sent me 200 plus pages of stuff with some folks here are smiling, so they probably got the same stuff, which I could find myself in there because I could find Walter Hodge and his family, and I could find the Webster line, which is my mother and Ronald Webster's sister, and so forth. But this is like deeds and wills, and I leave this to my 8 children and so forth. And the very first deed that she sent, because this is the way that the Webster line, it starts out, I, Peter Webster, of His Majesty's 3rd Regiment of Foot, now residing in St. Kitts, etc., 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 hereby bequeath, whatever. And I said, oh, that's regiment, that's military, the military keep good records, and so probably I can find out something more about this man, which I did. I went and I Googled, and up came Peter Webster, who's the first Webster in Anguilla, in 1790s and so forth, who was a soldier who came to Anguilla, and he was the first Webster in Anguilla. So the Websters, there are no Websters in the 1700s and so forth, the early 1700s in that record. But they came towards the end of the century, and he was a military guy. And then I found, where he was this 2nd lieutenant, and then he promoted to a captain and so forth. So he was somebody who was a noted military guy. He was a captain in the 1st West India Regiment, which took St. Lucia from the French the last time, back in 1814. So now I'm saying this to say that we have the potential to find out stuff about people and bring them to life. Okay, when you're just seeing names, so it's like reading the Bible and this person begat that person begat that person. And every now and then there's an interesting person in them, but then the rest of the begats don't really make any sense, so, But you could find people. So here is Peter Webster. Now, Peter Webster married the daughter of Reverend Jonathan Fleming. Reverend Jonathan Fleming married the daughter of Governor Arthur John Hodge. So here's the first Hodge. Here is his daughter marrying a Fleming. Now here's a Fleming over in the corner over there. And I'm directly related to that Fleming. Now, that Fleming, I had read about him before. I had come across him in Don Mitchell's writings about the archives, Anguilla from the archives. And there's a little paragraph like this big that says he was the Anglican priest in Anguilla, and he ordered his slaves to kill any slaves who they found stealing his cane, which they did. And there's a court case about it. And just like that. So when I'm now doing the research, here's his name again, jumps out at me, Reverend Jonathan Fleming. I say, oh my God, that fellow was my 8th great-grandfather. I mean, he's a priest, but he's killing people, right? So you get interesting stuff jumping out at you. So I actually took this to another Fleming, Felix Fleming, who's our playwright in Anguilla. And I said, Felix, would this be an interesting story? This priest who was ordering his slaves to kill, thou shalt not kill, but preaching it, but, So he says, so I said, why didn't you write a play about this? Isn't it interesting? He said, yeah, it was an interesting story. So why didn't you write a play about it? He said, no, Tim, you write it. So I've written a full-length play, which I'm going to put on sometime soon so that I can get some time, about the life of this Reverend Jonathan Fleming, because there's a trial and there's a appeal. He appeals. He's how dare his what do you call them? His people, people like him, his peers. How dare his peers, his white planter peers, charge him for killing a slave, right? It was a slave. But the thing about it is that they were smart, because who was making them rich? It was the slaves. So if you kill off all the slaves, then they wouldn't have any. So they found him guilty and charged him the value of the slave. And so it's an interesting story. And then he appealed it, and he won an appeal, actually. So I created this story, which one of these days I won't tell you the whole story. You got to come and see the play. But here was. So now the stories people are coming to life. It's just not just a name anymore. So here's Governor Hodge, who fights off the French, defeats the French when they're trying to take Anguilla, right? With two handfuls of men, fight off the whole French army, right? So here are historical figures now, they're coming to life. Now, the same Governor Arthur John Hodge had a nephew whose name was Arthur Hodge, like him, who is also famous because he's the first planter in the New World, in history then, to be hanged for maltreatment of his slaves in Tortola. So he's an historical figure. So when you do the research, you will find people who you don't want to really be related to. But you'll also find a lot who you say, wow, that guy is. So when I do my research, the names I talk about, Walter Hodge, my father, and Ronald Webster, the revolutionaries, and so forth, and to find that these are connected to people who was like-minded back then, 200 years before, it comes alive. And so my research then, whereas I started out asking, and I honestly at that point in time did not know anything other than that my mother was a Smith before her mother, before she married Webster, and she's a Webster, and she married Hodge. That's about as much as I knew. But then now I know that it's Brian, and so, and there's a connection with with Harrigan and well, not really Harrigan. Somehow that never can find a connection. But Bryan and Fleming and Smith, and then you go back and you find some other names and Hodge here in front of me, who's been doing this research as well, and St. Thomas, and finding where the Hodge connection comes from, because the Hodge is not an Island Harbor name, right? It's not an Island Harbor name at all. So where do I get this Hodge name from? And when can I ever find between the first Hodge, Arthur John Hodge, and then my great-grandfather, who's Thomas Benjamin Hodge? So there's like 5 generations of Hodges missing in there. Well, I know they're Hodges, but they're missing. But I still get the connection straight through the Webster line. So there was a lot of interesting stuff. Now, I wanted to say that about the health, there was someone who I told about this, and she said, yes, because her daughter has autism, and she has tried to find out if there's a connection. I see we have a nurse here and so forth. So yes, there's definitely a health issue. The DNA, again, it's so funny because, well, that's not really funny, but I met, years ago in the Bahamas, I met the director, my counterpart director of Social Security, and he casually said to me, my wife has Anguillan connections, and I met her, and like that was, she didn't know anything about Anguillan connections. All she knew is that she has Anguillan connections. So now I've done the DNA, I do the DNA, and I see these names, and I see this name in the Bahamas. So I say, well, I didn't ever think about the connection, didn't remember it, and the name is certainly not anything like, Fleming or anything, his names. And then she says, well, yes, her grandmother was from Angola and whatever. And I said, but I met you years ago, and now you're my family, right? The last person I want to really mention, because this is now where it really gets interesting to me. I would love to be able to go back and say, meet the people all the people whose lines I come from. So I went to Ghana in 2019, just before the world closed down. And by this time I had done my DNA, and I knew that I'm about 43% from sub-Saharan Africa, the different countries. I went right in that area. But how does one, because they're not the names and they're not the records and so forth. But on the other side, on the European ancestry side, I always wondered, well, can I connect beyond Arthur John Hodge, who was 17-something? Okay, he may have been born in Angola, we do not know for sure. And his parents may have been born in Angola, but certainly not his grandparents, because Angola wasn't settled that long. So therefore, where did he come from? Well, I've actually met a Fleming in England, who is my cousin, right? And he has connected with me, and he has filled in some of my family tree. I fill in a lot of his family tree because he didn't have those connections. Again, children, the line coming from that same Reverend Jonathan Fleming, who married the Webster, and whose Webster line comes down to me. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff that is there to be found, and when we are all connected, we will have this great Anguillan family tree. So at this time, if anyone has anything that they want to share, any questions that they want to ask, please do.
Say something, guys?
Yes.
There's a mic here.
So there's a mic. Raj, you want to say something? Come on. Pull the mic.
Anyone online would say something?
And anybody online that just wants to ask questions, they can send them in. I want to thank Gav Fleming here. Here comes the Fleming, for providing all of the electronics here, set up, sound system, and the video, and the projector service. Yes, Ralph?
Yes, my name is Raphael Hodge, and I didn't know that other Anguillians were into this family tree business. But in St. Thomas, I came home, and I reached in, and as I got to Anguilla, the guys told me that is a dance up Wilson Social Center tonight. I said, okay, I'll be there. I went up the White Hill to Wilson's dance hall, and boy, there was a lot of nice ladies, young ladies in there. And of course, I danced a couple of them and stuff like that, and feeling quite happy about myself. The next morning, when the sun rose, got up and got over the little and walked down the street, and I'm hearing these young ladies tell me, "Yeah, you were up Wilson last night." "Yeah? How you know?" "Well, I was there. You danced with me." Only to find out that each girl that I danced with was my family. I said, no, this thing can't work. I'm coming back here to Anguilla and going to no dance and looking no girls from Anguilla. I went to St. Kitts by my sister, and she told me about a Ruwan. I just got to mix up with the guy's name. It's called Archie Ruwan's brother. What was his name? I can't remember. Anyhow, he told me, because he's a Ruwan. My father's a Ruwan. I want to know what's the connection. He said, "Yeah, I could tell you all of my aunts and uncles on my mother's side, and I could tell you all my aunts and uncles on my father's side." And so he named them, and I wrote these names. He came, and then he said that Ruth Ann Harrigan was his grandmother. By then, from Heather, I had now known who my great-grandmother was, my father's mother. And it got real interesting. And he went further to tell me that my grandfather's brother was married to Frances Harrigan. And Frances Harrigan is Cyril Hodges' mother. But her husband died in Shoal Bay. He was walking on his boat, and the boat fell on him, and he died. And she ended up marrying Joseph Ruwan. But the other interesting part came when he told me that Frances Harrigan was my mother's mother's sister. So this lady would have been my mother's aunt. So, I can't remember his name. Archie's brother, Archie's mother, basically is who it is. His father is my father's uncle. And his mother is my mother's aunt. So here I found out that we are not only cousins, but we double up cousins, right? And so I have found in the family tree, in the lineage, that I have a lot of that. For instance, everybody knows Charles Richardson. Yeah, Charles Richardson. Charles Richardson and I are double cousins. Here again it happened that his father, my mother, is his aunt. Charles, John Richardson. His mother, that's Charles' father, my mother is his aunt. And his mother, my father, is her uncle. So I have been doing this on and off. Boy, but when Heather sent me that information about my grandmother, Ruth Ann Harrigan, and Charles Rowan, boy.
Ruth Ann Harrigan had about 20 children.
Huh?
She had about 20 children. Ruth Ann Harrigan, right?
Ruth Ann?
Yeah, she had in the Cops.
Yes.
She had about 20 children. So she's the mother of the whole of that whole area, the whole Mount
Listen,
Fortune.
from
Cops.
under the White Hill,
Yeah, the
down
whole
to
area.
Boy Hino Hill, these two people populated. Yeah. She had I tell people from Boy Hino Hill. Now, a lot of Anguillians. Do you know where Boy Hino Hill is? You?
I don't know it is.
You know? Yeah.
I don't know it is.
You don't know where Boy Hino Hill is? No. You know Joseph Hodge is? Joseph Hodge structure?
Yeah.
You know where structure house is?
Yeah.
There's that little rise right there.
Yeah.
Of course, all these places has grown down. But that is Boy Hino Hill.
Okay.
Okay? I tell people that from Boy Hino Hill to under the White Hill. And only after a while I found out that on top the White Hill is also my family, because my grandmother, she came from under White Hill in Island Harbor, really. That's my mother's mother. And I got down, somebody told me her mother's, I'm trying to find out all these things still. Her mother's name was Mary Smith. They call her Sia. And somebody showed me where her house was. I learned about that since in St. Thomas, that she lived in this area, and I keep asking questions, and I went to the spot, but I haven't got that fully verified yet. But it's interesting with this family tree, and I have been excited like the rest of us in this venture.
Okay, thank you, Ralph. Anybody else wants to say something about family and family trees here?
Anyone on the internet?
Anybody else wants to?
I can see one
Okay, so any questions from the? Okay, so we're going to see, we have someone who is, okay, so we have Leonard Hodge. Do we know which family has the early recorded history in Anguilla? Well, Leonard Hodge, do we know which family has the early recorded history in Anguilla? Well, the recorded history is the stuff that we've been talking about, all the, which is really the historical record. So we know that there is some of the early history. The names that when Dr. Harrigan spoke first, he spoke about some of the names here. Coakley, for example. If you go to the early record of Anguillians, and I'm going to bring up that record, I did have it here for you. The first Anguillian census that we know of, 1717, 1718. There are names in there which have disappeared from Anguilla, but some of them still remain even though the family names are not here. So Brimagin, for example, Farrington, Welches, these names come from, we would imagine, planters or settlers here in the early years. Some of the names don't exist in Anguilla anymore. Derrick was here into the last century, and the person I spoke of earlier, remember I told you there was a Derrick. Now there are Derricks in Antigua who are our family. Interesting is that all across, what you say, there's some here now? Yeah, I did hear that, yeah. But there was a name, there was a time when the name was not here, was missing from Anguilla. So that you find, for example, Hajjis in Antigua, and the Hajjis in Anguilla and the Hajjis in Antigua, the Hajjis in Tortola, in Montserrat, in Dominica, all came from the same line. So you find Hajjis Bay in Antigua, and you find etc. Okay, we have someone here from Marvin Lake. Someone would like to know more about my grandparents, Thomas Vanderpool and Anilare Hodge. Now, I knew these people when I was growing up, when I was a child. Anilare and Tom, of course, I knew them. Their daughter, Alcina Vanderpool, was my grandma who resided in French Quarter, St. Martin. So you see here the connections now. I know the names very well. I can, vaguely remember the people, but those are the people who White Hill is very close to my house. And so people like my mother and them would certainly know. Godwin Carty, that's my brother-in-law in Miami, somewhere in Miami. Very interesting, should be an interesting project. Because he is the sister of my wife, I have done her research as well, and I'll be able to go back to, what's the name of the hill? Isaac's Cliff in South Hill. Isaac is the cliff, I imagine, I don't know, is named after Isaac Carty, who was a great-grandfather of these people here. So I've actually been able to go way back with his line. So we have, at some point we had up to 55. I'm not sure if there were more. We have 64. We had 64 persons with us at one point. There are some others here, other comments from the beginning, people who are watching. Today, somebody's watching from Brampton, and that sounds very much like the UK. Canada, okay. Atlee Richardson. Samuel Reyes, my cousin, is watching from St. Thomas. Tamara Hodge, that's my daughter, who's married to a Fleming, so you see, these names come back. Lettice Stoddard, he went to school with me, and from the White Hill again. Carlson Connor, he is from New York, Appanay, New York, yes, he's watching. I got 2 emails today from folks in England. Darlene Hodge, Sabra Richardson, okay, she said she forgot, she was supposed to attend. Rickiel, that's my nephew. Judith Combs, Kevin Myers, Ethne Richardson, that's my sister, Leonard Hodge. Marvin Lake, Godwin Carty, Daniela Gomes Ledger. This is wonderful. I know more about my maternal grandmother's family, Martha Hughes, than my paternal grandmother, Elizabeth Richardson. Now, one of the interesting things about this genealogy is that there's so many Elizabeths and Marys and Joseph and Benjamin and Thomas and John and Peter. Of course, all the biblical names. And so, thus, the difficulty in identifying, when Ralph was speaking a while ago, he said Charles Richardson, right? That's the name he called? You had any idea how many Charles Richardsons you got in Anguilla? When you said that, my mind started to wonder which Charles Richardson he's talking about. Because there's at least 5 or 6 that I could think of the top of my head. And that's today. So, do you imagine when everybody was named Joseph and Benjamin and Mary. So both of my grandmothers, for example, are Mary, right? And so it's that's the reason why this becomes so interesting. In a sense, it's like detective work. So when Heather, for example, presented me with the information, in it there was Joseph Benjamin Hodge, who's my father's father, correct name, but he was not the correct Joseph Benjamin Hodge. So his father was a different person. I was able to do some detective work, argued with her a bit, to find out that this is not the right Joseph Benjamin Hodge. Of course, I did not know because the name is the correct name. But the year of birth was one clue. The other clue was that the person who was the father of that Joseph Benjamin Hodge was a teacher, a school teacher. With the correct name again, Thomas Benjamin Hodge, but not the correct Thomas Benjamin Hodge, because my grandfather did not have a school teacher as his father. So that's the reason why. So you have to do a little detective work to find out if this is the right person, because when you're doing what Heather did, she's just seeing names, and is in a sense, some of it is well, I'm trying to place this person into this, and it fits. So there's some detective work involved, and it's very interesting, I must say. Jean Lake saying, well, I guess you have my family tree on my mother's side. That's the Jean Lake Jean Lake. Yeah, Jean Lake is related to yes. And then there's the Connors of Long Bay, and those of Blowing Point, Malcolm Connor. I wonder if that's a Malcolm who went to school with me. But they're the early Richardsons in Anguilla. Again, Richardson is today the most common name in Anguilla. But if you go back to the history, there's a Governor Richardson's tomb, for example. And in my family line, now I would never have known at that point that, but I do have Richardson as in my line, my mother's line, my father's mother's line, also Carty. So when you really try to connect all of these, you will find that there are connections that you did not know of. And like I said, when I started out, I married Hall and Carty from South Hill, right, and Barbados and and so forth. But you know, her family is Lake from Carlsbottom, right, which is the same lake that Bummy, who was here a while ago, related to, and probably you guys as well. And so, and I'm related to that same lake, right? And she's related to the lake. So who knows? About the double, which Ralph spoke about, there's a lot of that. So for example, the Peter Webster who I spoke of, he had, several generations down. There was one of the children who was, I think his name was another Peter Webster, Peter Abraham Webster. And out of those 8 children that they have, 3 of them are represented in my lines. So Ronald Webster and Walter Hodge and Atlin Harrigan, 3 of the revolutionary heroes, they all come from that same line, from the same maybe great-grandfather or whatever. So there's a lot of that double cousins and so forth. And it's most interesting, I must say. And I think when we do this, now I have used in terms of I am a member of as well of Ancestry.com, but I have never really found any information there that has helped me per se. I use their family tree system to put my information into it. And so I have come up with a family tree that is there, which as I have shared with some people, that uses their structure, but not really their data. As we go further and further beyond, and as you begin to connect using the DNA and so forth to people who are maybe in England or other parts of the world, there's somebody who have contacted in Australia, somebody who have contacted somewhere else in the world far away, who is a 5th or 6th cousin to the DNA that we found. So it really gets to be most interesting, and I would really like to commend those who have committed to doing this, and who will commit to doing it, and get the information. Go there and ask people. Go to the older folks and ask them, who's your grandmother and who's your great grandmother, because if they are a grandmother today, they're in their 80s and their 90s, and they can tell you who was their grandmother or their great grandmother, we can go back 6 or 7 generations. And at that time, we can begin to really create the basis of the Anguilla family tree. Because today, while we have 15,000 people, when I was in high school, the population of Anguilla was 6,519. And then you go back another couple of generations, it was probably in the 3,000 and the 4,000s. So it should be easier to find, if we can find where these families started from. The Hodges and the Brooks and the Lakes and those names that were there. We can, and the Harrogans and the Smiths and so forth. We can find, you got the list, the other one which is the census. I'll just very quickly show you what the census looked like in 1717. And the names that are there are some of the names that you still have in Anguilla today. So there's Harrigan, but it was actually Harrigan. Yes. Can you get it up on this? Yeah. So that's a census, and you will see Hodges. You will see Harrigan, but it's spelled Harrigan. You will see Lake, but spelled as Leak, and so forth. But a lot of the names, the original Anguillan names, that are still here today, are still with us. And then we will close at that point. So those of you who are viewing online, you can see the list, but here, as of now, we're not seeing it here right now. And there's where you see the Coakley and the okay, we're not seeing it on the screen here. Okay, but we will share it.
In fact, Edward Coakley was a name and surname, but eventually Edward Coakley became a first and middle name.
Yes.
Quite a lot of Edward Coakley's Lake or Edward Coakley Gums, but Edward Coakley itself was the full first and second. But Coakley became a second name, very popular second name in Anguilla. Your uncle, Edward Coakley, and a lot of Edward.
Yes.
Henry, but who was Coakley? Oh, because Edward was linked with Coakley very often. Yeah.
Okay, so we see here, for example, Samuel Downing. Downing, that's where we get the Downing shoal down off Sandy Island from. There's George Leonard, and George Leonard Kentish carries his names. He was the Anguillan who was the governor at the time that went to Vieques. George Leonard and so forth. We have Timothy Connor, so even the first names was wrong. Charles Will, okay, Harrigan, Romney with a Rumney, Edward Coakley Sr., John Downing, Lackram, Hugh Fleming, Madonna, Richardson's, of course, Gums, Rowan, spelled Rowan, Connor, E.R., Benjamin Rogers, Arundel, okay, Lake, John Lake, John Richard, here these names showing up. This is from a Jamaican website. And then we have here Magella Smith, who was saying that her mother gave her a history of the relatives. Her aunt, Miss Osborne, that's Terry Harrigan's mother. It's a breathing library. And then somebody is saying so is Gretel, who's a sister. And so lots of these folks have a lot of information. Now, Tinsley, I have done Tinsley's research for Barbaro. It is a much more recent name in Anguilla. So that Joe Tinsley, who by the way I played bridge with, he would be playing bridge, and when we want to go to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning, he's at 90-something, he's still going strong. Tinsley and Barbaro, that family. And yes. Yeah. So we have lots of information. All these family trees now have to come together, right? And create the great Anguilla family tree. So it's 8 o'clock. So we want to say thank you for coming and joining us. Marilyn Harewood, very interesting team, has done a wonderful research. Well, all of us are trying to do wonderful research. Thank you. And also we want to encourage you to be part of the revival of the Anguilla Genealogical Society. All of us, we have our commitments and everything else, but if each of us puts a little time, we can make this work, and we can really find out and put together this big family tree. I saw one, I think it's in St. Thomas, in the Caribbean library down there in St. Thomas. There's just one family that takes up like a half of a wall. And so can you imagine, we'd have to find a spot to put this, but maybe on the library wall here, we can put at least the branches, and then the twigs and so forth will have to be, people have to fill them in on their own. But we can have the big branches that go back to 1650, 1685, 1700s. Thank you very much for coming. Anybody wants to say anything?
I just want to thank you again for coming out. This is a big project, and we need all the support of everybody. But I think this gentleman, what's your name, Harrigan Touré? He kind of said it all when he said, the relationships within families. And I think that's what the tree is all about. We want to make sure that that for future generations of Anguillians, they can begin to trace their families and see how they all interrelated. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing to be ashamed of. That's the way life is. It is what it is, so to speak. But we want to bring that out, put it down, document it, so that in the future people can relate to that. So I want to thank you for coming. It was nice for us to have at least 60 people on streaming in, and so we know that it's not just you alone, but there were other people around the world who were part of this activity. Thank you again for coming.